Hello one and all. Hello to everybody. Hello therapy nerds. Hello self-growth seekers. Hello to all of the therapists out there who want to be great, not just good at their craft. All of the counselors, therapists, coaches that want to make sure that they are doing great work with their clients. Welcome. We are all here together for therapist skills training with Beth, and I'm excited to be here with you guys tonight to do part two of the work that we began last week, the training that we talked about last week. I also welcome everybody to say hello in the comments and to jump in when you're ready. So this is our third live episode, and tonight's topic is the second part of what I called last week, therapists who ask boring questions have boring sessions. And also another way that I phrase it this week is asking transformational questions so that you can create inspiring transformational results for yourself and for your clients. So I am Beth Miller. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a certified life coach, energy healer, and spiritual counselor. And I am also the owner of Positive Energy Holistic Counseling and Institute. I am creator of the trademark model Advanced Holistic Counseling and Coaching. These live Instagram and Facebook trainings are really meant to be a newer feature where I can help sort of tap into all of the great expertise that all of you have, and also bring some of the knowledge that I have to the party to help all of us to be the best therapists that we can be. We go live every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. on Instagram and 8 o'clock on Facebook. So you might want to get your notebook, because we are going to be talking about a lot of very practical tools in order to create more transformational results with your clients in session. You may want to write some of those things down or review some of your work from last week. So when we were talking about, how to not ask boring questions, how to not hold mediocre sessions last week, which is a little tongue-in-cheek, but is really important, because we don't want our sessions to be flat. We want our clients to get the most out of our sessions. And we need to know how to do that with what techniques, what questions, how to ask them, when to ask them, in order to be able to create those dynamic sessions with our clients. And what I shared last time is that the number one skill that I see greatly increase a therapist's clinical effectiveness, foundational level skill, is actually about the art of question asking. It's about improving the questions that we ask, and the way that we ask them, how we ask them, what we're asking, because they immediately change the sessions that we have with clients. The reasons that I gave last time, just to do like a very quick review, is a significant amount of the quality and content of your sessions is really highly dependent upon what questions you ask, how you ask them, and why you ask them. The questions that we ask have a lot of impact on the session. For example, they determine the direction of our sessions. Very often what happens in the session is influenced by the questions that we're asking and the directions that things can go in. It may determine the depth of your sessions as well, which we covered last time, and also enables you to truly understand the person in front of you, the client in front of you, and their experiences. And so if you didn't see the live last week, watch the replay of that, because there's a lot of material about that in there. It's about 25 minutes in total. The art of question asking means the difference between holding, boring, predictable, flat, mediocre, meh sessions with clients versus asking and having interesting, active, dynamic, effective, transformative, efficient, co-created sessions. So there's a lot to gain here by up-leveling our question asking skills. And in addition, the questions that we ask actually are really quite foundational. These are really foundational skills, and but maybe not always really taught or really unpacked, or maybe assumed that we all know these things, or maybe it's sort of just based on the personality of the therapist or the counselor versus being based on the training that they get. So a lot of you are probably voracious learners, and you might do things like, learning EMDR or IFS or, the Gottman method. And those are incredible models and modalities that actually kind of do best if they are building upon these foundational question asking techniques. So for those of you who are kind of wanting to up-level your skills and you go learn new models, that's awesome. Please do that. But make sure you do these things here in order to make those models more effective, or any session that you have without, whether you have those other models or not. So it's very likely that if you do some of these things differently, you just sort of this week just jump in and practice them differently, it's very likely that you're going to see a change in the content of your sessions within 1 week. So last week, and again, you can watch the replay from that, so I won't go over all of it, we talked about really step one of the art of question asking for therapists and counselors is you really have to look under the hood. Okay, so I'm going to review that again because it's so much of what we do today is going to actually loop back to this idea of looking under the hood. So looking under the hood means understanding who the client is, their experience, their issues, by being insanely curious, by being a real question asker, by wanting to know more, and by really tuning into what the client's saying and making sure that we're asking more so that we really understand the person or the issue at hand in front of us. So I find that most therapists are under asking, and then it makes it harder for them to help. So they might be under helping or under intervening in a way because they're under asking. And so we want to amp up our curiosity quite a bit and be guided by the desire to know more and to fully understand whatever the situation is that the client has just described to us. Slow down a little bit. Ask the client to slow down a part of the story and really get in there. Ask to zoom in on parts and unpack the details. That's not intrusive. That is you being a great listener and somebody who is incredibly interested in that person in a way that might make them feeling very seen and very understood. So give yourself permission to do that and to try that. And we're doing this in contrast than just asking that one question that therapists sort of lean on a little too heavily, which is, how does that make you feel? We're going to keep that in our tool bag, but we want to add a tremendous number of curious questions that help the sessions be much more rich than what that one question can actually achieve for us, okay? So that was part of the work from last week, and you can watch the replay about that for more information about that. So last week's practice assignment was that I asked you to look under the hood, to become insanely curious, and also to look for an indication that you are asking more curious, deeper questions or more transformative questions. And the way that you would know that is that you'll see the client do something like this. I never thought of it that way. Let me think about that more. I never thought of that question. That's a good question. Because what's happening there when they're doing that is it lets you know that you have asked a question that they never asked themselves, or you have asked a question that their friends haven't asked them when you've been talking, they talk these problems out with their friends. You're being a therapist that's thinking outside the box. You're being a therapist that's listening in a way that is likely to provide more transformation because the questions you're asking are creating a shift from the normal pattern of how they think about this issue. So look for that over the next couple of weeks as we're practicing this, because it's going to be the indication for you that you're on the right track with asking more transformative questions. The second thing that we want to do that, again, is going to seem so foundational. You're going to say, Beth, come on, this is so foundational. But it requires us training about it because so many times we're getting this wrong. And this is about eliminating assumptions, assuming nothing. Okay, now I know, assumptions aren't good things to do, but we're doing them all the time in session. And the more we can put a halt on that and do something different, the more we're going to find that our sessions become richer and deeper very quickly. Okay, so here's what I mean. Your assumptions are about your worldview. They're about how you see life. And they're about the experiences that you've had. They may match what the client experiences, but they may not. And the more you lean in on your assumptions, the less you actually get to know the person in front of you and how you might limit their progress and your connection, the way that you're co-creating or working together. So I encourage you to behave like you really are from another planet. I even say that to clients sometimes. I'll say, forgive me, I'm gonna act like I'm from another planet right now. But can you help me fully understand that? Like, I don't want to make any assumptions about what that's like for you. So what does that mean to you? And then inviting the person to educate me about them and about their worldview. So, for example, when a client says to you, I have a lot of anxiety. This is a very common way. This is a common example that I give to people about not making assumptions. When a client says to you, I have a lot of anxiety, this is a perfect moment where you are likely to make assumptions. You see anxiety all day long. You know what it looks like. You know the general feelings. You know the general physical sensations. So you feel like you know what this person is going through. And you might nod and say, oh, yes, I could see you have a lot of anxiety about that. My feeling about when somebody says, I have a lot of anxiety is that's the equivalent to me of if you live in Europe and you want to come visit me in the United States, if you say, Beth, what's your address? I want to come visit you. It's like me saying, I live in Ohio. Meaning, you know the general country I live in, but you'll never find me. When somebody says, I have a lot of anxiety, that word only means two things to me. It means that the client knows the word anxiety, and it means that the client's in distress. But otherwise, I don't know anything about what they're experiencing. I don't know anything about their body, their mind, their emotions. I just know they know a word and that they're in distress, which means I need to go back to step one, get under the hood. Ask a ton of questions. Ask so many questions so you can understand what anxiety means to them. What does that look like for you? How do you know it's anxiety? How do you know when you feel it? What occurs in your body when you have anxiety? What are the things you've noticed that trigger it? What are other words that you would use for anxiety if that word were eliminated from the planet? Now, all of those are simple questions. Nothing I said there is brilliant. It's asking them that actually becomes the difference. And the questions are simple. But if we don't ask them, we've missed a huge opportunity because we have assumed so much that we actually really can't get under the hood with the client, which means they're also missing the opportunity to fully understand what anxiety means to them and understand more about what it's going to take to resolve it. Another example for me that I really like is about ways we make assumptions about events or maybe anything else that the client tells us, not just things like anxiety. So if the client says to us, my house had burned down. Do not make any assumptions about that. Now, what if you assume that that's a terrible thing? The client's house burned down. But what if that's not how they experienced it? How is your reaction to that going to influence them? So if you say, what a tragedy. What if they say, I guess, but I'm actually really grateful. I mean, my dad was a hoarder and now I don't have to clean out his house and all of his old stuff. And basically I feel free. But maybe it is a tragedy. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe I should be feeling bad. Oh gosh. We just redefined this experience for this client because we made assumptions. So instead, what we might do is when the client says, my house burned down, we might immediately go into that curiosity, looking under the hood and say, What was that like for you? Again, that's not a brilliant question that I'm asking. But if I don't ask questions like that, I make assumptions, and now I'm missing the opportunity to be able to truly understand what the client's experience is like. In fact, the other way, me assuming it's a tragedy, might actually derail the client's experience that they were having, and it might make them think they should feel a different way. And we certainly wouldn't want that either, right? The third step of the art of asking questions in sessions, especially ones that are more transformational. The third foundational piece is about being highly intentional in our sessions. So what is the intention of what we're asking? Why are we asking it? What is the purpose of it? Know why you're asking what you're asking. So I have an expression that I use sometimes when I'm training therapists, because we might be all working together and role playing, and I might ask people, what should happen next, or what are the questions we might ask next. And they might ask questions that what I will say, the way I phrase it is, that might be a good question, but it may not be a right now question. Because there is a difference between, all questions might be good. All questions might be valuable to ask at some point over the tenure of the time that we know the client. But not all of them are right now questions. Not all of them will be the most efficient, transformative questions to ask in this moment. And then we have to figure out, well, how the heck are we going to figure out which ones those are, Beth, right? Okay, and we're going to get there. So, for example, let's say that you meet with a new client who has a lot of anxiety about mothering her new baby. And how she compares herself to all of the people on social media, and she feels a lot of anxious feelings about this, or what she calls anxiety. There are literally a ton of questions that we could ask this client, right? So one set of questions that we could ask might be about the anxiety. What does your anxiety look and feel like? How does she know when she feels anxious? How long has she felt that way? How does she behave when she's anxious? What happens in her body when she feels that way? What social media platforms does she follow that typically trigger that? Is there sleep deprivation involved? Does she have postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression? So there's a lot of lines of questioning right there, right? But there also could similarly be good questions about, tell me about how your mother parented you. What's your mother and father's anxiety level like? Is there any intergenerational trauma? Was there modeling of anxious behavior? Now, those might be really good questions, but they may or may not be right now questions, right? Or the questions we might ask about the baby. Is your child sleeping? What are the sleep and feeding techniques you're using? Are you breastfeeding? Who's helping? So those are all really valuable questions too, but are they right now questions? So how do you know what questions are right now questions? How do you know what to focus on? The answer is, to be your most effective, you have to know why you're asking what you're asking. The more intentional you are about your question asking, the more effective the sessions will actually become. So therapists have told me in the Advanced Holistic Counseling and Coaching certification program that learning more about the art of question asking has created a huge difference in their sessions with client. It up-levels their sessions pretty quickly because the sessions become more deeper, they're more specific, they're more customized to the client's goals and their breakthroughs. Okay, so the reason why is because the therapist knows that what they're asking and why they're asking it is essential. Okay, step 4 of the art of question asking. All of your questions should be driven by the client's goals. So how do we know what questions to ask right now? What are the now questions? They're the ones that will get us closest to the clients achieving their goals in that moment. Okay, so pause. In the Advanced Holistic Counseling certification program, we teach a very specific way of figuring out with a client what is the purpose of our sessions, what are the things we're working on. We have like a sort of a specific set of techniques that we do for that. And those set of techniques then help us to keep our sessions focused in the future while also having flexibility. I'm not going to be teaching that here during the therapist skills training, but I will say this. You as therapists or counselors very likely have some method of knowing, of like helping you and the client determine the purpose of your sessions. You have some strategies or techniques, and if you don't, here's a great moment for you to kind of pause on that and say, I don't really have a strategy or a technique to use in order to be able to figure out what we're working on and to keep us focused on that purpose in the future. And I probably should, okay? If you do not, or if you do, either one, whoever you are out there, I'm going to give you a question that you can ask in any moment, in any session, to help you figure out at least what the client wants right then. It may not be what they want for their larger treatment goals, but you should have a process for that. But it's for figuring out what they want right there in that moment when you're working together. Because sometimes it's hard to figure that out. When they're telling you something that happened, you might not know what your purpose is. What am I supposed to help with? And this question is going to be really helpful, hopefully, if you try it this week and you see whether it comes in handy. So let's say that a client comes into session and she tells you all about how her sister-in-law made her feel really bad that she's not hosting one of the holidays. This is probably going to resonate for one of you out there. Now, there are a million questions you could ask this client, are there not? I mean, there's a ton of questions you could ask, especially if it's a new client. You could ask a million questions about the holiday, the sister-in-law, why she's not hosting, why she is. But how do we focus in on what the client's goals are? How do we ask the right now questions? So if we ask this question, it's going to help us focus a lot. The question is, how do you want to feel? Or how do you want this to be? How do you want to feel? Or how do you want this to be? The client will often typically pause here. They are not accustomed to focusing on what they want. They're accustomed to focusing on the problem. And they might say, after a pause, I want to feel like it's okay to not host holidays when I'm this busy at work. I want to feel like that's all right. Great. Now you know what they want. That simple question just helped you focus the session. Now you know what they want. And now you can ask a million questions. Now you can go under the hood, look under the hood, and ask things like, okay, what gets in the way of you feeling like that's okay to do? What would it take for you to be able to feel okay about not hosting when you're busy at work? What kinds of communication do you need in order to be able to talk to your sister-in-law about this? Now we can get under the hood and ask a lot of questions because we know what the client wants and what the purpose of that session is. So I'm going to leave you with that, and I'm going to invite you to ask that question this week. So perhaps consider doing the following. Get insanely curious this week. Resist the desire to have assumptions, and instead get insanely curious and ask a lot of questions by looking under the hood. And lastly, if you don't know the purpose of what your client wants from you in that moment or what they want from the session, ask them, how do you want to feel, or how do you want this to be? And then that's going to give you the direction so that you can ask a bunch of questions from there. We have lots more to talk about the art of question asking. There's so much more that we can do. In the meantime, whether you're watching right now on the live or on a replay, please put questions and comments in so that I know where you guys are at, what you're thinking, what your ideas are, what you want to share, or you can even email me at institute@positivecounselingli.com, and I will see you next week. I wish you a wonderful week of fabulous sessions. I hope you will practice some of these very practical tools, and I look forward to seeing you then. Take